Hey there. Welcome back to another peaceful evening together. Tonight's story begins in a quiet home where time moves a little slower and memories breathe softly between the tick of a clock and the hush of an old kettle. We'll sit with Margaret, now in her 80s, as she shares a story not from a book, but from a watch. A simple silver pocket watch that her late husband wore every day for 60 years. To her grandson, it's just an old thing that ticks. But for Margaret, it holds an entire lifetime. Quiet mornings, love letters, stormy nights, Sunday walks, gentle hands, and 1,000 moments that passed so slowly, they never really passed at all. Before we begin, if these stories bring you comfort, feel free to like the video and subscribe. And in the comments, tell me, is there something you still keep, not for its price, but for its story? Now, settle in. Let the soft rhythm of time calm your breath. And let's drift gently into a story not about keeping time, but about never forgetting it. The old clock in Margaret's living room ticked gently in the background as the front door creaked open. "Hi, Grandma," her grandson said, brushing off the early autumn chill from his sleeves. She looked up from her armchair, her knitting resting on her lap like a memory paused mid-sentence. "You're early," she smiled. "I know. Thought we could have tea before dinner." He placed his backpack on the floor, the same spot he dropped it as a child during summer visits. There was still something about this house, the smell of lavender, the quiet hum of familiarity that felt untouched by time. Margaret gestured to the side table. "There's shortbread, your favorite." He poured tea into the delicate porcelain cups, her favorite set with tiny bluebells. They sat in the soft glow of late afternoon, silence stretching comfortably between them like an old, well-worn quilt. After a while, she reached into the drawer beside her and pulled out a small, velvet-lined box. She placed it gently on the table between them. He looked at it, then at her. "What's this?" She opened it. Inside was a silver pocket watch, simple, a little scuffed, its surface dulled with age. The hands were still ticking, steady and slow. It was his, she said softly. "Granddad's?" She nodded. He wore it every single day, for 60 years. He picked it up, felt its weight. "It's heavy." Margaret smiled. It carried time, and time gets heavier the longer you hold it. He turned it over, noticed a tiny engraving. M&T 1954. "Your initials." She nodded again, eyes distant. "The day he gave it to me to hold was the day we decided to marry. He said it wasn't just for hours and minutes. It was for promises, moments, all the things a clock can't measure." He ran his thumb along the cool metal. "It still works." "Yes," she whispered. It never stopped. Even when he did, he looked up. Margaret leaned back, her eyes not sad, just full the way a sky looks before it rains, heavy with meaning. "I want you to have it," she said. "Not because it's old, but because you're old enough now to understand what it means to hold someone's time." He hesitated. "I'm not sure I do." "That's okay," she said. "You don't need to understand it now. Just carry it and listen. Listen to what it remembers." He smiled faintly, then carefully placed the watch back in the box. Margaret reached over and closed it slowly. "Every tick," she said, "holds a story. He ran his hand across the top of the box. "It smells like cedar," he said. She chuckled. "That's the drawer. He kept it there at night, always in the same place. Said it liked the quiet." The boy leaned back in his chair, the cup warm in his hands. "Did you wind it every day?" "Every morning, even after he passed. It made the house feel less empty." He looked at her, something soft passing through his eyes. "You think it remembers everything?" Margaret's smile returned, slower this time, more distant. "I think it remembers what matters." The tea had cooled. The clock ticked on. Outside, the last amber leaves danced in the breeze, catching light as they fell. In that quiet, the boy reached for the box again, opened it, and lifted the watch once more. The ticking filled the space between them. "Tell me a story," he said. Margaret folded her hands in her lap. "I'll tell you the first one. The day he bought that watch, when he still had all the time in the world, and he gave every minute of it to me. It was 1954, a Saturday afternoon that smelled like fresh bread and motor oil. Margaret was 19, working part-time at her father's bookstore on the corner of Milton Street. It wasn't glamorous, but she liked the quiet, the hum of turning pages, the sound of shoes on worn wooden floors. He walked in with a folded newspaper and a windblown jacket. Tall, with a face you might not remember unless he smiled. Then it was impossible to forget. "Any poetry by someone who doesn't sound like they're crying?" he asked. She raised an eyebrow. "You mean someone who sounds like you?" He laughed. That was the first moment. He bought a collection by Auden, paid in coins. The next week, he came back. Said he didn't really get the poems, but there was something about the way the words lingered that felt honest. "I think I like the pauses," he said. "They make you wait. Like the author trusts you'll stick around." For the next few months, he came in every Tuesday and Saturday, rain or shine, always pretending to browse, always finding his way to the poetry shelf. She noticed how his fingers lingered over the spines, how he traced letters like he was trying to memorize the way they felt. They spoke in stolen moments, shared glances. A line from a book turned into a private joke. And then one day, he asked if she wanted to get a coffee. Not dinner, not a movie, just coffee. "I want to talk to you when we're not surrounded by commas," he said. They walked to a small cafe 3 blocks down. It smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso. They sat there for hours, talking about everything and nothing. Books, war. What scared them? What didn't? He told her his name was Thomas, but everyone called him Tommy. She told him her favorite sound in the world was the turning of pages. He told her he was laughing. Her laughter. He had dreams. Not big ones, just steady ones. A small home. A quiet life. Time enough to enjoy both. One day, just before Christmas, he brought her a small box, wrapped in brown paper, tied with a red ribbon. It was snowing lightly outside. The bookstore smelled of pine and dust. "I know it's not much," he said, "but it's yours." She unwrapped it slowly, expecting a book. It wasn't. It was a silver pocket watch, the kind you might find in an old film. It had scratches on the back and a slightly faded face, but the hands were still moving. "It was my father's," he said. "He gave it to me when I turned 16. Said it was for men who show up on time and stay long enough to matter." Margaret held it gently. "It's beautiful." He leaned forward. "I had it cleaned up. I couldn't afford a new one, but I didn't want new. I wanted something that meant something." She looked at him, puzzled. "I want to give you my time," he said. "All of it. I don't have a ring, but this is my way of saying I want to be with you. Every hour, every minute, every second." There was a pause, the kind that poetry lives in. She didn't say yes. She didn't need to. She reached out and took his hand. From that day on, the watch became a part of them. He wore it always, every day, on his wedding suit, on their first trip to the coast, in hospital waiting rooms, on sleepless nights when the children cried. It ticked through job changes, lost friends, birthdays, and burnt dinners. It ticked when they argued, when they made up, when words were too hard and silence said more. Sometimes, Margaret would catch him holding it in his palm, winding it slowly, like it calmed him. She asked once why he still carried it when everyone else had moved to wristwatches. He simply said, "This one holds more." On their 10th anniversary, he had a new engraving added, below the initials, "Still yours." On their 20th, still ticking. It became their silent language. Whenever he couldn't find the words, he would set the watch beside her. When she miscarried their second child, he left it next to her pillow. When her mother passed, he tucked it into her coat pocket. It was never loud, just present. A heartbeat. Years passed like seasons. Children grew, hair grayed, but the watch never stopped. On their 50th anniversary, he gave it to her for a day. "Just for a while," he said, "so it can remember what it's like to rest on your heart." She wore it on a chain, close to her chest. Every tick felt like a whisper. When he passed, it was the only thing he left specific instructions about. "Keep it wound," he wrote, "even if it's just for the sound." And she did. For 10 more years, she wound it every morning, even when she no longer needed to know the time, because it wasn't about knowing. It was about remembering. Time didn't pass quickly for Margaret and Tommy. It unfolded like a soft quilt, slow, patterned, and stitched with care. Life wasn't grand or loud, but it was deeply lived, in small routines and quiet rituals. Every morning began the same way. Tommy would wake first, careful not to disturb her. He'd wind the watch at the kitchen table, the same way he had since the day he received it. A gentle twist, a subtle click. Then he'd set it beside her teacup. Margaret would find it there, tick, tick, ticking, as steam curled from the mug. She never said anything. She didn't need to. It was his way of saying, "I'm here." Their kitchen was tiny, but full of smells, of light, of warmth. He'd hum while making toast. She'd shuffle in with her robe and kiss his shoulder before sitting down. The watch was always between them. Not intruding, just present, a witness. She remembered one morning when the power had gone out. The house was quiet in a different way. No humming appliances, no blinking clocks, only the sound of rain on the roof and the ticking of the watch. It felt, strangely, like a comfort. She leaned against him at the window, their tea gone cold, and whispered, "I think I love the way it sounds more than I ever admitted." He smiled. "It's our metronome." Evenings were their favorite. After the children were in bed, after the dishes were done, they would sit on the sofa together. sometimes reading, sometimes just watching the fire dance in the hearth. She'd rest her head on his shoulder. He'd hold the watch in his palm. "It helps me think," he said once. "Keeps me from rushing." And she believed him, because with him, nothing ever felt rushed. Not the kisses, not the conversations, not the years. The letters he wrote her even after they married were dated not just by day, but by the hour. Monday, 6:47 a.m., one began. "You were still asleep. The sun touched your hair just right. I think time paused for a minute to stare." Another ended. "It's 9:22 p.m., and I miss you even though you're just down the hall." She kept every one, tied with a ribbon in a box that still smelled of cedar and ink. On Sundays, they walked hand in hand through the park, the watch tucked in his coat pocket. Children laughed in the distance. Leaves crunched beneath their feet. Time didn't just pass, it lingered. There was one Sunday she especially remembered. The bench beneath the big elm. The one where he proposed. That day, he took the watch out and handed it to her. "No ticking today," he said. She looked at him, puzzled. "Why?" "I forgot to wind it. First time in years." He shrugged. "Maybe we don't need it today." And they just sat, in silence, in presence, in peace. That was the magic of their life, the ordinary made beautiful by how much it mattered, by how much attention they gave it. A life full of repeated moments that never once felt the same. Birthdays came and went. So did anniversaries. They never threw big parties. Instead, Tommy would cook her dinner, light a candle, wind the watch, and at some point during the evening, he'd set it between them and say, "Thank you for another year." One winter, she got very sick. The kind of sick that makes you think about final words, final looks. He stayed by her side, never left the room, slept in the chair, read to her from her favorite books, always with the watch ticking in the background. When she finally woke up enough to speak, she whispered, "What time is it?" He didn't look at the wall clock, just opened his hand. "Now," he said, "it's always just now." And somehow, that was enough. She recovered, slowly, and when she was strong enough to stand on her own again, she found the watch on her pillow. The ticking seemed louder, clearer, as if it had waited for her. That was the thing about their love. It didn't shout. It waited. It stayed. It noticed. It found beauty in the way she stirred sugar into tea, in how he folded napkins into perfect squares, in how they held hands, even when it wasn't necessary. She recalled once sitting on the porch after a summer rain. The sun was setting. He brought out 2 cups of tea, set the watch on the railing, and said, "Let's see how long the light lingers." They sat without speaking, watching the sky fade into pinks and blues. The only sound was the soft tick of the watch and the occasional sigh of the wind. Even their disagreements were quiet, calm. Neither of them liked raised voices. Instead, they would sit, each holding one side of the silence until one of them finally spoke. And often, in the middle of it, Tommy would wind the watch, not to interrupt, but to anchor, to remind. Their children noticed it too. As they grew older, they understood that their father's watch wasn't just an accessory. It was a symbol of rhythm, of patience, of love measured not by milestones, but by minutes well spent. The watch ticked when the kids moved out, when the hair turned white, when they forgot where they put their glasses, when they sat quietly for hours, saying nothing, just breathing the same air. It ticked through birthdays and quiet Wednesday mornings, through crossword puzzles half finished, and through jazz records played softly in the background. It ticked through a life fully lived, one heartbeat at a time. Not every moment was wrapped in peace. Some days were stormy, not the poetic kind, but the real kind. Loud arguments, misunderstandings. Life is pressing in too tightly. Bills unpaid, jobs lost. Nights spent on opposite ends of the bed, too tired to say sorry, too hurt to start over. And yet, every storm ended the same way, with the soft tick of the watch. Tommy never stopped winding it, even when the silence between them was long and difficult. Even when anger made their home feel colder. The routine remained. Margaret came to realize something. The act of winding the watch wasn't just habit, it was a vow. A daily promise that even when words failed, time would keep moving, and so would they. One evening, after a particularly hard week layoffs, a broken car, a sick child, Margaret found herself crying at the kitchen sink. Tommy came in, said nothing, and simply placed the watch beside the soap dish. It ticked. Tick, tick, tick. She turned, tears still in her eyes. Is that supposed to fix everything? No, he said, but it means I'm still here, still keeping time with you. They stood like that for a while, not hugging, not touching, just breathing in sync with the seconds. And somehow, the air softened. The noise quieted. Their resilience wasn't loud. It was faithful. Sundays were their reprieve. No matter how busy the week, Sunday mornings were sacred. They walked to the same bench in the park, the one beneath the elm. He always brought the watch, tucked safely into his pocket, not for checking time, but for marking it. She would point out birds. He would guess their names, always wrong, always confident. They would share a single cup of coffee, passed back and forth, too sweet, and always lukewarm by the time it was gone. One Sunday, after decades of walks, he took the long way home. When she asked why, he said, I just want more of this, more of now. They passed the bakery, the one where they used to buy pastries when the kids were small. The owner, older now, still remembered their names. She's still tickin'? He asked, nodding toward the outline of the watch in Tommy's pocket. Always. Tommy smiled. Storms came in different forms over the years. A house fire that destroyed their bedroom. The cancer scare that almost took him too soon. Margaret's father passing suddenly. Their daughter's divorce, with 2 young children caught in the middle. Each time, the same rhythm. Fear, struggle, tension, then the steady beat of the watch. Tommy would sit beside her at night, gently winding it. Not speaking, just winding, as if time itself needed his help to keep going. When the fire took their room and most of their belongings, Margaret sat on the curb in her bathrobe, shivering. She was too shocked to cry. Tommy emerged from the crowd, holding only one thing to watch. It was in my drawer, he said. The one thing I grabbed. She laughed, broken and grateful. That's it? It's enough. And somehow, it was. After that, they didn't rush to rebuild. They moved slowly, room by room, bought mismatched chairs, painted the walls themselves, hanging new curtains, yellow, her favorite. The home that rose from the ashes was simpler, quieter, but filled with peace and time. Later, in the years when health became a regular conversation, the walks got shorter. Tommy's legs didn't move like they used to. Margaret's hands stiffened in the cold, but still, they walked. One Sunday, he stumbled. Just a misstep. But he laughed it off. Margaret frowned. "Are we getting old?" "We've been getting old since the day we met," he said. "But we're also getting better at it." She held his arm tighter. They continued. The bench under the elm was still there, worn but steady, just like them. One autumn, they brought their granddaughter along, 6 years old, bright-eyed and loud, asking about squirrels and acorns and why the leaves fall down. Tommy showed her the watch. "It ticks," he said. "Like a heart?" "Exactly." The little girl pressed it to her ear and grinned. "I hear it." Margaret watched them. 3 generations, 1 heartbeat. When the skies turned gray, they hurried home, laughing in the drizzle. It felt like something out of a movie. But to them, it was just Sunday. One especially harsh winter, Margaret slipped on the ice outside the porch. Her wrist fractured, her pride more so. Tommy helped her up slowly, with a steadiness that came from years, not strength. She sat at the kitchen table, hand bandaged, pain humming beneath the surface. He brought her tea and the watch. He placed it gently in her lap. "It still works," he said. "Like you." She smiled, the edges of her hurt softening. That winter was long. Dark came early. The world outside felt quiet, a little too still. But inside, there was always the familiar ticking. A lullaby for resilience. A metronome for healing. The last winter they spent together was the quietest. Tommy moved more slowly. His laugh was still there, but softer. His stories took longer to tell, interrupted by pauses and far-off stares. Margaret noticed the way he held the watch differently, more like a keepsake than a tool. One evening, as snow settled thick on the windowsill, he sat beside her and said, "I think the watch is tired." She smiled faintly. "Or maybe you are." He didn't argue, just nodded. His hand wrapped around hers like it always had, fingers now thinner, but still warm. They didn't speak much that night. The ticking filled the space between breaths. The next morning, he didn't get out of bed. Margaret brought him tea, but he didn't drink it. She brushed his hair back, kissed his forehead, and sat beside him as the light moved slowly across the floor. He drifted in and out of sleep. Sometimes he spoke, sometimes he smiled. Once, he reached for the watch and held it to his ear. "It's still going," he whispered. "You are too," she said gently. In the days that followed, time felt suspended. Family came and went. Friends called. But Margaret never left the room. She sat beside him, winding the watch each morning, just as he always had. She laid it beside him, let it tick its slow rhythm into the silence. On the final day, just before dawn, he opened his eyes. "You were my whole time," he said, barely audible. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she kissed his hand. "And you were mine, when you were mine." Then, with a final breath that seemed to carry decades, Tommy was gone. The room didn't change. The air didn't shift. The world outside didn't pause. But inside her, something sacred had stopped. And yet the watch kept ticking. That morning, Margaret sat alone for the first time in 60 years. She held the watch in both hands, pressed it to her heart, and cried until the tea went cold and the birds began to sing outside the window. In the days that followed, people brought flowers, food, kind words, but nothing spoke louder than the small, persistent sound that echoed from her nightstand. Tick, tick, tick. She couldn't bring herself to stop winding it. It was all she had left of him that still moved. The first night alone in bed was the hardest. The sheets felt too big, the silence too vast. She placed the watch under her pillow, let its ticking rock her to sleep. The rhythm she had once shared with Tommy now soothed her in solitude. Each morning she wound it, not because she needed the time, but because she needed the memory, because she feared silence more than anything else. Time didn't heal, but it did soften. She began speaking to him, quietly, over tea, before bed, on walks. The watch became his voice, the ticking his reply. She returned to their Sunday bench a month later. Alone. The leaves were beginning to bud. The breeze carried a hint of spring. She sat for hours, watch in hand, letting the sounds of the park fill the gaps he left behind. A little boy passed with his mother and pointed. "What's that noise?" She smiled. "It's my husband." The mother gave a puzzled look. Margaret just smiled and waved them on. Some people thought she was eccentric, holding on to the past. But she wasn't holding on. She was carrying forward. The watch kept her grounded. When the phone didn't ring, when the house felt too still, when nights stretched too long, the ticking became her companion. She started writing in a journal again. 1 page a day. A memory, a thought, a whisper to him. "Today, I saw your favorite bird. Your old sweater still smells like you. The sky looked like the day we first kissed." Each entry began the same way. "Tick, tick, my love." One afternoon she visited the attic. A box full of old things waited for her. Photos, letters, and there, nestled in tissue paper, was the receipt from the day Tommy had the watch repaired for her birthday. The ink had faded, but she could still read his scrawl on the back. "Every second, yours. T." That night, she made a decision. She placed the watch back in the velvet-lined box Tommy had once used. She didn't close it, just let it sit open, breathing. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't wind it. The ticking slowed, then stopped. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of memories, of time that had been deeply, beautifully spent. She ran her fingers over the engraving, still ticking, and whispered, "So am I." The room was still, afternoon light spilling across the carpet as Margaret closed the velvet box and gently slid it toward her grandson. He looked at it, hesitating. "I don't know if I should have it." Margaret's smile was small, but sure. "That's exactly why you should." He opened the box again. The silver watch sat quietly, no longer ticking. It seemed asleep, resting, waiting. "It's not working," he said softly. "No," she replied. "It's waiting for someone to wind it again." He picked it up carefully, the weight surprising him. It wasn't just metal. It was memory. I don't know how to take care of something like this. Margaret leaned back, hands folded. You don't have to know yet. You just have to carry it. He turned it over in his hands. The engraving caught the light, still ticking. You and Granddad, you really lived through everything with this thing, didn't you? We did, she said. And now, you will too. It's your time now. He chuckled nervously. Seems a bit heavy for someone who still forgets to water their plants. Margaret laughed. You'll learn. The important things we don't forget forever. Sometimes it just takes a little sound to remind us. He looked at her. She looked tired, but peaceful. Like someone who had finally finished a long, meaningful sentence. What if I break it? He asked. Then fix it, she said simply. That's what your grandfather did. It's what we all do. They sat in silence for a while, letting the moment breathe. Then, without thinking too hard, he placed the watch on the table and wound it. Click, click, click. A soft tick returned, like a whisper finding its voice. He looked up. That's it? Margaret nodded. That's it. It's quieter than I thought. It always was. He leaned back in his chair, the ticking now a thread between them. Do you ever feel like he's still here? He asked. All the time, she said. Sometimes in dreams, sometimes in the mirror, but most often, right there. She nodded toward the watch. Do you want me to leave it with you a while longer? He offered. Margaret reached across the table and gently closed his fingers around it. Number, it's yours now. And besides, I don't need it anymore. I remember the sound. He swallowed, suddenly unsure why his eyes stung. Okay. Take it with you, she said. Let it be with you on quiet mornings and messy days. Let it remind you to slow down, to notice, to listen. I will, he promised. They hugged, long and close. When he left, he tucked the watch into his coat pocket, exactly as Tommy had once done. It felt unfamiliar, but right. As he stepped outside, the cool air wrapped around him. The world felt the same, and yet somehow different. He paused on the porch, pulled out the watch, and listened. Tick, tick, tick. That evening, back in his apartment, he placed the watch on the kitchen table and sat with it. The room was filled with soft light and quiet. The kind of quiet that made him think of her house, her stories, her warmth. He began to notice things he hadn't before. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the way the wood of the table creaked when he leaned on it, the way his cat always blinked slowly at him, like a message in a language he never learned. He opened a drawer, pulled out a notepad, and began to write. Not anything profound, just little things. Today, she gave me time. The watch still ticks. I think he'd like how I brewed the tea. Over the weeks, he took the watch everywhere. On walks, to work, even to the grocery store. People didn't notice it. Not really. But he did. He noticed how he started checking his phone less. How he started noticing more. The smell of rain. The way the barista always drew a heart in his foam. The older couple who held hands every morning on the same bench. One evening, he met a friend for dinner. She was running late. He checked the watch, smiled, and didn't mind at all. When she arrived, he showed it to her. It belonged to my grandfather, he said. And before that, It belonged to time itself. Some things aren't kept for what they do, but for what they remind us of. A watch that no longer tells time can still hold 60 years of love. It can carry Sunday walks and silent nights, laughter, loss, the quiet rhythm of a shared life, slow and steady. Margaret passed the watch on, not just as a keepsake, but as a message. Take your time, because time is not the enemy. It is the storyteller. It's in the morning tea, in the soft creak of old floors, in the pause between two words. It's in the waiting, the winding, the remembering. And though the hands of the watch may circle endlessly, they are always returning, always coming back to where they started home. Tommy's watch still ticks, not because it must, but because someone decided it mattered enough to keep winding. That's all memory is, something you keep choosing to wind, gently, each day. And maybe you have something like that too. Maybe it's a letter, a ring, a photograph, a recipe card, a sweater you never wear, but never fold away. Maybe it's a sound, a scent, a line from a song. These aren't just things, they're anchors. To the people we love, to who we were, to the moments that built us. They remind us that time, when given freely, becomes a legacy. Some days, all it takes is one look at that object. The watch, the frame, the scribbled note in a book's margin to feel someone's presence again. Not as they were at the end, but as they were when they laughed with you in the kitchen, when they forgot where they left their keys, when they danced with you in socks across the linoleum floor. It's funny, isn't it? How the smallest thing's a ticking sound. A faded photograph can hold so much. They say time heals. But time doesn't erase, it archives. And if we're lucky, it echoes. Tonight, as you lay down your head, maybe you'll hear an echo too. In the soft rustle of your blanket, in the rhythm of your breath, in the hush that follows remembering. And if you do, pause. Let it stay a while. Let that old memory, that beloved voice, that feeling you can't quite name, sit beside you like a friend. Let it say, you're still here, I'm still with you, and we're still ticking. Because love doesn't disappear. It transforms. It weaves itself into the everyday, into how we hold doors, how we brew our tea, how we smile at strangers and remember old songs. And sometimes, if we listen closely, we'll find that love still has something left to say. So if you're holding something old tonight, a book, a trinket, a thought, hold it a little longer. Let the memories breathe. Let them live again. Because sometimes, the quietest things say the most. And now, as the story closes, maybe the ticking of a long-loved watch will keep you company as you drift into sleep. Tick, tick, tick. Before you go, if these stories bring you peace, I invite you to like this video and subscribe. It helps others find comfort too. And in the comments, I'd love to know, what's something you've kept, not for its price, but for its story? Maybe it's a blanket that still smells like home, a note written in crooked handwriting, a toy you couldn't throw away, a sound that brings you back. Because our stories are never truly gone. They're just waiting like a watch in a drawer to be heard again. And now, it's your turn to tell one. Good night, and may your memories be gentle.